are you a proponent of, let's take an idea of a Monday.com, for example, or a
Yes.
Calendly.com,
Right.
and
Open
say, okay,
source
let's find a way
alternatives.
to create this as an open source way?
100% unabashedly yes. And it's a brilliant strategy. By the way, there's a gentleman by the name of Neil Shen who recently broke off from Sequoia, who literally did that and made, I think, $50 billion bringing
Literally made Chinese not
Western
versions.
SaaS consumer internet companies to China and
Right.
creating Sequoia China, which recently they had to like split off from the mainland company for geopolitical reasons. Yes, but that's not the whole story. So I think that there is actually a lot of truth in that. That's a funny example of the Silicon Valley show. I should watch that episode. Sounds
Oh yeah,
entertaining.
you should watch the whole entire thing just so you have the context of that one episode.
Just
I
so when you
will.
talk to Adam, he can
That's
tell
right.
you things with less
We,
words,
we
and
can
you can
catch
say,
up
"Yeah,
and
I know exactly what you're talking
have
about."
inner dialogue about it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a ton of validity to that example, and I think that there's no shame in that at all. So like, by the way, I want to kind of go back a little bit further in history and sort of say SaaS. So one other way I describe our thesis, and this has also been super helpful for me. There's been an evolution of the distribution models, let's say, or the innovation models in which you have ideas that manifest into technology in the sort of the software industry or the technology industry. In the beginning, you literally had to, physically sell, like, carrying a pen here, but like, maybe my unplugged keyboard is a better example. You had to like physically burn. I don't even think CDs existed then. They didn't. They were sold on floppies. Oracle's first software was literally shipped in boxes with like very large floppy disk
The 5-inch ones.
series. And in order to upgrade the software, you would have to order, and they would have to ship you a new series of floppies from which you would need to kind of like physically install, and you would own those physical like pieces of technology that would give you an upgrade. And then the pricing model was all built around that too, is perpetual licensing, where you would like basically buy that version, and then you'd have maintenance that you'd pay for the version, and then in order to upgrade a new version of the software, you'd have to physically spend a new upfront amount for the new version, and then do that over and over again. Most of I would say probably 99%, with some interpolation, synthesis, mixing and matching of ideas, most of the categories in software, including SaaS, which have become a little bit more like fractal, domain specific, like Cal.com is like almost like one feature is like, wow, it's $1 billion company. That just happens because of economies of scale and humans using more and more technology. But most of these ideas were implemented in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even in the mainframe days, like scheduling, booking things. I mean, this is like calendar functionality. Like I was recently watching the oral history of Mike Markkula, who was the first CEO of Apple. He was a guy that Sequoia founder Don Valentine introduced to Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs to basically help them with the business plan and like run the company. And Mike was also a really brilliant programmer, and he wrote Fortran and BASIC programs that would actually run on the early Apple computers. And the collection of those programs came with a credit, sort of a copyright credit at the bottom, which was Johnny Appleseed. You might remember this from the early Apple computers. It's Johnny Appleseed name. So Johnny Appleseed was Mike Markkula, right? And Mike, in the Computer History Museum, he describes this. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's a really great multi-hour oral history. Mike actually personally wrote the programs for the applications that would ship in the early Apple computers. So including the calculator, calendar app, bookkeeping app, a lot of these basic, very basic primitive word processor. And so I just think back to like the most fundamental basic things that humans do as part of their work or their lives have been re-implemented and re-implemented and re-implemented so many times in the history of technology, going back to literally the 50s and 60s, that when we have new ways of distributing and innovating in the core technology, what happens is you just reinvent and you re-implement what came before with shinier and newer, sexier, more sort of societally relevant and interesting abstractions. And then those things end up taking off. And oftentimes people are given a choice. There's sort of like, there's like the free version of the thing, and maybe it's open source and it's like less sophisticated, but you can totally control it. Then there's like the proprietary version of the thing, which is like, much more polished and sexy and packaged. This is so fascinatingly, for the first time in sort of skipping to the AI stuff, we've seen this like incredibly shockingly surprising almost acceleration of equivalency, where this actually happened this week. I mean, the latest llama models are